from child abuse and domestic violence to an author whose first novel is getting ready to be released. Precious Ugly is the story of Clementine, who shares some characteristics with this amazing author, and she's about to tell you her story and how Clementine is a reflection of her and some of the things she wished she could have done. Please welcome Rae Cline. Rae, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Claudia. Thank you so much for having me here.
I am so stoked that you decided to join me today for a lot of reasons, but I think you have such an amazing story to tell, and you have so many good things that you've done through the challenges and traumas that you went through growing up. I would love to just dive right in because we have a book release coming. Let's talk about Precious Ugly.
Yes, let's talk about Precious Ugly. Well, the first thing I have to say is that Precious Ugly is the story of Clementine. She is 13. She's living in a conversion van. She on a campsite in Harper's Ferry. She's pregnant. And she is surviving a lot of things, including her very charismatic father, who begins a sort of cult following as a riverside preacher, I guess you would call him. And she has to decide if the miracle he keeps promising is coming is going to save her or destroy her. So she's going through quite a bit. And I think the thing that really draws me so much to Clementine is her resiliency.
I agree with you because in reading about her from chapter 1, like you can tell there's something different. You know what I mean? Like you can tell she is a survivor and she is someone that has the ability to make it on her own. But what makes that sad is that she is only 13. What made you create such a character that had that strength that was built from a difficult place?
Thank you for that question. It's one that's very near and dear to my heart. I personally grew up surviving. I share spaces with Clementine for sure. Not all spaces. She's definitely surviving more than what I survived, but she's also surviving things that I have witnessed in so many students I've worked with throughout the years. I've had the honor and privilege of working with at-risk youth, mainstream youth. I've worked with at the high school level and on college campuses. So my witnessing of difficult circumstance and such survival and such resilience and girls and women and boys and men, it really is the heart of who Clementine is and the voice I feel that she is trying to deliver through the book.
You know, when we look at that resilience and strength and where it comes from in a lot of people, as you talked about, we look at it kind of as a negative, you know, or we're ashamed to talk about it. I'm trying to change that, and I feel like you are as well, because we're trying to show that strength and resilience as a positive thing. How do you think that's being received?
Exactly. Well, I mean, there's a two-part question there. So how is it being received through the book, and then how is it being received in general, right? This giving a voice to trauma and being strong enough to share that voice outside yourself. I think in terms of the book, so far the readership, it hasn't actually released yet, so the readership's been a sort of intimate viewing of it, and I think the response has been so positive because of her, it not just resilience, but also her tenacity toward that resilience. She's not one to take it lying down, so to speak. She is strong, and she does um, try to plan for a better present and a better future, which seems uh, difficult for a 13-year-old girl, right? But I have to say, in my experience as a 13-year-old girl, and also as someone who has worked with so many young adults, the strength and tenacity in a 13-year-old child is extraordinary. And so to be able to see that, especially in an era of Epstein survivors, there's been actresses who are very young surviving terrible things through their careers in a very high, these are two very high profile cases, right? I think it's really amazing whenever we give space and grace to voices who are surviving with strength and are getting past that sense of shame and talking about it. And I think that's where it pulls us into this sort of societal shift that I think we're starting to see some of. We're starting to talk more about it sociopolitically, socioeconomically. How do these things happen to children? How do we change this? And I think there's so much more work to be done, which is the reason that Clementine was such an important character for me, such an important voice, and probably one of the reasons it took me 14 years to write her. I felt like I just needed time to make sure I was worthy in my craft and in the storytelling for her voice to go out into the world. Sorry, that was a very long response to your question.
It was amazing, though, and you just did a lead in for the next question. So it's almost as though you planned it. We did not, I just want to say.
I didn't.
In writing about Clementine, and you mentioned you did share some things, some pieces of her story. Was that difficult, or was it healing, or was it both for you?
Yeah, absolutely, Claudia. It was both. I think whenever any writer is writing a character that really speaks to them, I think that if it's not difficult, and certainly very difficult at times, then you're probably not doing the character full justice. But then there's also moments where there's such joy. It's a really great writing day if you're crying at one point and you're laughing out loud at another, which, I mean, you're laughing at your own joke or your own writing, so take that with a grain of salt. But that's a good writing day, right? Even if it's messy, even if it needs a lot more editing, that's okay. So, yeah, and so because it is so difficult, it is a process, right? You have to self-care as you're writing such difficult topics and scenes, but at the same time, it is cathartic. It's meaningful. And you're doing it in a way. Hopefully, if you're doing it right, you're doing it in a way that is bigger than yourself. It's bigger than the project you're working on at the time, that it will have meaning for other people. And in this case, with Clementine, it will have meaning for so many girls out there today, right now, who are surviving terrible circumstances and aren't seen, and women who survived such terrible circumstances and are still surviving because it's a process, it's a lifetime process when you go through significant trauma, right? So that's what makes it so necessary for me, I think.
One of the things that I dealt with, and I still have my moments, I'd say, after going through trauma and domestic violence, is a lack of vulnerability, putting up kind of that shield or that wall, because if I don't let people in, they can't hurt me.
Yes.
You are getting ready to release to the world your baby, your girl, Clementine. How does that feel in that vulnerability realm? And have you had to prepare for that?
Well, first of all, hugs to you, Claudia, for surviving what you've survived, and thank you for sharing that with me. Um, and then to answer your question, yeah, it's terrifying. It's terrifying. I think for any book to go into the world, because for any writer writing something and I think for any creative, regardless of what your particular form is, sending that creativity into the world does feel like a process of birth. And so it is terrifying in so many ways, and exciting, you, I feel a sense of hope for connectivity. A hope that readers will not only um, see Clementine and hear her voice, but will maybe see Clementine in their experience if they come across a person who seems to be in some need, to stop and say, hey, I'm here. I see you, without judgment, without being pushy about it, but just saying, hey, I see you, because sometimes that's all it takes. And I think, and like, I really love that you had said, that this going through trauma can lead us to putting up walls just to protect ourselves. And in some degrees, I think we have to do that to some degree early on in order to process and survive it. And then hopefully later on, we can then start to dismantle brick by brick enough of that wall that we then can reconnect, because it's hard. It's hard whenever someone close to you, someone who maybe is supposed to love you in your life, then is so traumatizing towards you, and that changes, I think, your your outlook on what um, family and friendship and love and safety and home can be. So I think getting back to your original point about the walls, I think some of the wall is necessary in order to allow yourself to feel safe. There's a little bit of that that's necessary. And of course, you have to have, some strong shoulders to put your story and voice of what's not only happened to you, but if you're writing story about it or creating some creative form about it, a little bit of that wall will help you, survive the putting it out into the world. So I think it all comes together in a really functional, necessary space, for survivors. But yeah, it's definitely a process, isn't it?
It really is. And I like what you said kind of about keeping some of the wall. And what I envisioned is like a low wall, that you can
Yeah,
step over,
yeah,
but still a wall there that
yeah,
gives that small level of protection that we still need,
yeah,
but we can also get over it, and people can get over it as well in our direction.
yeah. I like that.
So we've just created a new concept, which I think
Yes.
is amazing. One of the things that you just talked about was seeing people, really making people feel seen, loved, appreciated. And I know for you that's really important. So much so that you have a whole creation that you've done called the Warm Words Project that focuses on people who are dealing with homelessness or domestic violence. I would love if you would share a little bit about what it is and what inspired you to do that.
Yes, so the Warm Words Project is a very simple idea. It's about a very grassroots effort to simply be present day to day. Let me give you an example. So, the Warm Words Project includes a creation. For me, I use hats. So, I'll take a hat, a toboggan, a knit hat, and I'll put a bottle of water or box water, a very small journal, a, a little card, a kind bar, and then I tie it up and I put a little card on it, Warm Words Project, with the website in case anyone would want to share their story in the future. And if not, that's okay too. And then I'll keep some of them in my car. So I usually have a bunch of little hats tied up in the back of the car in case I come across someone who looks like they're unhoused and are perhaps in need of just a momentary act of kindness, someone to see them. Um, and also, I should also say in the information in the card, I'll also add information on a local shelter, some resources that could be helpful with phone number in case they're in a situation where they need to find immediate housing and safety. And then I'll sometimes throw one in my shopping bag when I'm heading to the market, and if I see someone, on the street, I'll give them one of those. Sometimes I'll put a few together and I'll just take it to the local shelter. It's just it's a way to, for me at least, to recognize and be present with especially our current socioeconomic situation in our country. And I think sometimes those small acts of kindness that are very personal and grassroots level can be so helpful because giving to charity absolutely is a necessary and an important piece of being present in your community, right? But I think these warm word hats that I give out, it just feels a little more personal, and all of the resources that I'm using to create them and give them aren't going to some managerial center base, and it feels like there's a little bit of impact. I'm kind of thinking big but acting locally in a way for me. And again, I love hats and I love riding, and especially when the weather starts to get cold out, having a hat can be a good thing. Having a clean hat can be a good thing. Um, there was a time in my life where I was in a shelter, um, a women's shelter. And it was because I was escaping an abusive domestic violence home situation at the time. Um, and I was on the street for about a day before I was able to get in contact with services and get taken into the shelter. And it was one of the scariest moments of my life. And I found myself thinking about how vulnerable it is and how so many people, regardless of circumstance, regardless of how they ended up without a home, without a support system, without anyone who sees them, how prevalent that is in our communities now. There are so many good people who are doing incredible things to help change that. Um, domestic violence hotline is one of them that I have on my website. I think they're an amazing resource, safe haven for families. The family shelters, the domestic violence shelters, the women's shelters, homeless shelters. It's all necessary, and the funding for it is not what it should be right now. For sure, we need to do a lot of work there. But yeah, so it's just warm words is just a small act of kindness that I can do, that is personal and grassroots and something that I can do every day, as I have the resources to do it. So it's thank you for bringing it up. It's very meaningful to me.
I love it for a lot of reasons. The first is, the people that you talked about who are dealing with not having anywhere to go for whatever reason, and then sometimes it's because there's nowhere safe to go. Those people feel invisible. They feel rejected quite often. They feel less than, and they feel like they're not worthy. That's why they were in a violent relationship to begin with. And so the fact that your act, it really revolves around, yes, it's a hat and it's resources, but it's really about looking that person in the eye and saying, I see you and you matter to me. And I think that's the most beautiful part of what you're doing.
Thank you.
Do
Yeah,
you do you want people to kind of pick this up and be able to do it anywhere? I mean, this is something, I can do, you can do, everybody watching can do. Is that your goal?
exactly. It's easy, and you can do it a couple of times. You can do it, once a week, once a month. Whatever works for you. Have your children help you make the hats. I don't want to form a central organization where money is being sent for administrative anything. I think it's just something that anyone can do. And my thing is hats. I love hats. So and it's functional, right? You can just put everything in a hat and it's just a little package, of love and care that you're giving off to somebody. But I'm sure you could use a lot of different things, a little backpack, whatever that can be functional for a person. I mean, when I was, I was out on the street because I had to get out of the house. It wasn't safe. I didn't have anything. I didn't have my clothes. I didn't even have my purse. I was it was just me. I had a phone, which I was lucky to have because I could get in contact with the local shelter and start that process. But just a backpack would have
Mm-hmm.
something to put, a bottle of water, a kind bar, sometimes I'll put a couple dollars in, if I'm able to do that. That's, just something to help in the moment. And again, this is something that anyone can do anywhere at any time. Keep them in your car, take them with you when you're going to the market. You see someone in need, without judgment. I mean, there are people who lack a home for so many different reasons. And I think so often it's easy for people to make assumptions about why and how they're there and why or how they're not going to a shelter and why and how they're making the particular choices at the time that they're making. And the truth is you can't possibly know. Everyone has a story, and um, it takes a long time for someone who's surviving difficult situations to find their voice and tell their story in a way that feels safe for them. And that can't be pushed. And so, if you can do something small to just let them feel seen and respected, and just that little bit of help, you never know what kind of impact that could have on someone. I was so fortunate. Um, that the people at the Betty Cronkey Center, that they saw me and that they were willing to give me a bed and resources and safety. And I don't know what I would have done without that, because I did not have anyone else to help me in that situation. And so I think I have, it's not a choice for me. I'm having been in that situation for just a very short period of time, mind you. I mean, it's only a day, and it was terrifying. And so I don't have a choice but to do what I can, um, in whatever way I can to try and give back.
I love that you brought up that people often literally have to walk out with nothing, because when we talk about domestic violence in particular, one of the things that I harp on is safety planning. And that's fantastic, yet not always possible. It's not always possible that you have the bag packed and hidden somewhere or at a friend's house or in your car or whatever.
Right.
There are tons of circumstances and times when an individual literally has to leave with nothing but the clothes on their back. And I think people don't often think about that and how difficult that is with everything else going on. And now you don't even have your own creature comforts to rely on. And so to give somebody just a small token of something that is theirs is enormous.
It is. And, yeah, agreed. Making a plan, which is why I think, hotlines like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, why they're so essential, because they can help someone who is in a domestic violence situation start to make that plan on the individual's terms and timeline, and at least just have it in place. Now, the barrier to that, I think, and certainly was in my case, is that number one, no one feels that they're ever going to be in that situation. I saw myself as a feminist. I would never put myself, especially growing up the way I did. I thought I was too smart, right, to put myself in that situation. And the reality of it is that there are people out there who are very good at, how do I want to say this? Very slowly charming individuals into an abused state. And so it does happen more often than we think, and more often than it's reported, for sure. And so, there are a lot of people who end up uh, feeling almost like they're blindsided by that moment when they realize, oh, this is so bad now. I literally feel like I have to leave, or I might not make it till tomorrow, kind of scenario. And so, yeah, so it is more common, I think, than what people realize usually, for that scenario to happen. Just having to get out immediately when you can, kind of thing. Sorry, I think I lost the thread on your question there, but
No, you're good.
yeah.
You're good. And I just want to echo what you said in that this can happen to any single one of us. I was a police officer and I was in an abusive relationship with another police officer. So, people looked at me as this expert, this, safety person, and I was the one going out and helping other people. But then I was going home and living that life that I was trying to save other people from. For me, I had to forgive myself, because I felt in some ways at fault, as you said, kind of for not seeing it. Looking back, of course, now I can see all the little red flags adding up and piling along the way. Did you have that experience where you had to take a moment and say, I forgive me? This was not my fault. And it's okay to say, I forgive myself and I didn't do anything wrong.
Oh yeah, it took a long time. I think I'm probably still processing that piece of it. It's part of the effect, you know. I was really using such negative language toward myself. You know, how could I be so stupid? How could I allow that to happen? I know better than that. I'm a feminist. I'm a writer. I'm a teacher. What am I thinking? I've spent so much of my life working with, kids who have gone. How could I let that happen, right? And maybe for me, I'm part of processing that is the book. And now that I'm thinking about it in the context of your comment, I give Clementine the foresight to plan. And when I think about her collecting these items, cans of peaches and um, trying to get her hands on Pop Tarts and, just stealing items from the campsite and the trailer, Beater's trailer, the camp manager's trailer, and just trying to collect all of these things into this canoe that she's found in the first chapter. I'm giving her so much more intelligence, um, preparation than I felt I had at the time that I was going through what I went through, not only as a girl, but then also as a woman. And I guess maybe that was my little gift to her. And maybe it was also a sort of, if you ever find yourself in a situation, even if you think you're not going to need it, start collecting the things that you need and put them in a space where you can get them when you need to go, because it really is that important for anyone who is feeling vulnerable. And whether you feel you're in a domestic violence situation or not, if those flags are there and you find yourself having to ignore them and push them off, oh no, it's not going to get that bad. Oh, it's going to be better. That's not going to happen again. Just go ahead and start squirreling some things away. That's what we call it, back home where I was growing up, squirreling things away. Just, find a space somewhere where you can collect them. And there's a peace of mind, I think, that comes with that. That's what I feel for Clementine. Maybe I needed that for her. I needed to know she
Mm-hmm.
had an escape hatch, as I was writing her, because I needed to know that
Mm-hmm.
she was at least, heading in the right direction, because I don't think I could have even made it through the first chapter without it.
I also love Pop Tarts, I just want to say. So I connected with her immediately on that vibe.
Yeah.
No, I think it's so difficult sometimes, to separate yourself from the acts of the abuser. And part of that is because what they have done to us, how they have beat us down and made us feel less than and made us feel needy and crazy and dumb and, all these other things. And it can be difficult to get through that. But I love that you took your character and gave her these little tidbits that would be helpful along the way. And in a way, that was healing for you.
Yeah. Maybe the subtitle for Precious Ugly should be How to Escape.
I mean, I think it stands alone just perfectly. Rae, what is next for you? I mean, the book isn't even out yet, so it's like, I'm not pushing you into the next project, but what's next?
Well, let me first say it's not going to take me 14 years to write the next one. I'm about halfway through the next novel. And interestingly, it's about a snallygaster. Now, I don't want to give too much away. It's kind of bad luck, or at least I feel a little suspicious, about giving away, talking too much about a project that you're in the middle of. But I do find this fabled creature very intriguing. So there's this monster lore about the snallygaster, and the snallygaster is this creature in Appalachia in different regions. It has kind of different stories throughout different regions, but one of the more consistent ones is that it's a little bit like a dragon with wings, and it has try to imagine it has really sharp teeth, but it also has tentacles that comes out of its mouth, and it's got claws, a long tail, and it would swoop down on unsuspecting victims in the night, strangers who are walking through a small town, wayward children who are doing things they should not be doing. It has this sort of Shirley Jackson feel to it for me. So I'm just completely obsessed with this creature, and so I've been feverishly delving into what that town looks like that has this fabled creature, lore in it, and how that manifests in the gender politics of the town, the socio-political and socioeconomics of the town. Kind of digging into some of the same issues, but with this really interesting creature. So that's what I'm working on now. So again, it won't take 14 years. I feel like the first book is how I kind of figured out in my voice how to write a long form to some degree. So that's probably I've got some skill sets that I can get through the next one a little quicker.
Now you can sprint, per se.
I can have moments of sprinting. That's it. We'll call it that. We'll call it that.
I love it. Where can people find everything? So Precious Ugly, where can they find that? Where can they find you and the Warm Words Project if people want to learn more about it, maybe participate in their own town? Give us everything.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So to learn about to get Precious Ugly, to buy Precious Ugly, you can go to Barnes & Noble, bookshop.org, which is actually running a promotion right now, 15% off. Use the discount Cline if you'd like to get 15% off. You can find it at Amazon, and you can also find it at your local booksellers. Here in New York, that's McNally Jackson, Books are Magic. Independent booksellers are my favorite. So, if you're inclined to go to your local bookstore. To find out information about me and Precious Ugly, you can go to raecline.com. All of it's there, and you can also find Warm Words there as well.
Excellent. Rae, you have been absolutely amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to share not only about Precious Ugly, but also about the Warm Words Project, and most importantly, about you, your story, and how you went from that little girl who needed someone to this amazing woman helping others. Thank you.
Claudia, thank you so much, and likewise, thank you for sharing your story with me. It's a real privilege.